Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SDS2 Connect Design webinar. My name is David Zapka. What we're going to be going over here is just kind of the basics of using SDS2 Connect and the round tripping between Revit Structure and SDS2. If you have any questions, please just go ahead, and when the webinar is done with, we'll have you email questions, or you can call in and ask questions if you have them at that time. But during the actual webinar, won't be actually taking any questions. So basically, what is SDS2 Connect? Well, SDS2 Connect is a plugin for Revit Structure that allows SDS2's design capabilities to be used within Revit Structure. And it also has the capabilities of transferring member and connection information to and from Revit Structure, and SDS2 basically keeps the models in sync with each other so that they stay up to date and current with each other. So kind of to start off with here, I already have just a real basic simple structure. A lot of you may have seen this structure. We use it for our basic training classes here. So I have that input in Revit Structure. Now if I zoom in here, we can actually see there aren't any connections being designed at this point. So what we need to do is, if we look at the Add-ins tab, up here we can see Install SDS2 Connect as a button there. So basically we need to run this install to prepare the project to be used with SDS2 Connect. And this comes up here, we should see an additional window open. We have a material file mapping window here. Now basically what we have to do here is we're basically specifying or corresponding our SDS2 material files to our Revit families. Okay, so what we need to do is specify, the section type, what material file that we want to use here, and then we have our different variables. So our variables on the left-hand side that are listed here, those would be the SDS2 variables that we have available. The variables over here on the right are the variables that are within the Revit family already. Some of these you'll see, like the little I here, basically what that means is the Revit family does not have that variable. So we're going to actually go ahead and create that within the Revit family. You notice the Sections tab up here. The Sections tab is going to list the different family types that are loaded, and then we have our SDS2 section size that we want to correspond to that family type. And these section sizes are just being populated from our material file that we have selected up here. You'll notice we have different ones for the different materials listed over here on the left-hand side. The other thing to point out here is our three buttons up here on the right-hand side. Okay, do we want to actually modify that family? Override existing values. Basically what that's going to do is if there's any discrepancies between the Revit family values and the SDS2 values, that's going to allow us to override those values with the SDS2 value. And then inject end preparations. That basically modifies the Revit family, adds the voids to that family so that SDS2 Connect can apply the correct end preps to our material once it designs connections. Once I say OK to that, the process that it goes through here, it could take a while depending on the size of your project, how many different families might be loaded into that Revit project. But while this is going through here, a couple things that I might mention that you could do to maybe speed up this process or kind of avoid this process in the future. Once you go through this, you could actually install SDS2 Connect on a Revit template. So maybe your company has a standard template that they use to begin all their projects. Well, you could go ahead and install Connect in that template. Then when you start a new project based off of that template, it's already installed. All the modifications that it's doing here in this case are already done to the different families that are loaded into that template. The kind of second option that you would have here to kind of avoid this process a little bit or speed it up is once this is done, you could go ahead and save the family as a whole new family, basically. So that would create a whole new family that has all the end preparations and modifications done to it, and you could go ahead and use the that family in the future rather than the one that you might be currently using or the one that Autodesk provides with Revit Structure. So once this finishes up here, we're going to see our toolbar up top is going to change a little bit. That install SDS2 Connect is not going to be there. We're going to see some different options or tools to be used with SDS2 Connect as soon as this is done here. Okay, we can see that up there on our toolbar now. We have those different tools up there like I mentioned. And again, our connections still aren't being designed. The reason why that is, under our options up here, okay, we have a option in here to design established connections, or we can design the whole structure. So basically, by default, we have this set to simply design established connections. Kind of the reason for that is simply so that SDS2 Connect doesn't just take over your entire model and start designing connections for everything. Okay, we could do that if we had design whole structure selected, but currently we do not. So what we would need to do, as long as we have it set to design established connections, what I might need to do here to get a connection, we have a connection type pull down up here at the top, and maybe I want to design a shear connection here, so I can set that to shear. I'm going to select the structural element I want to design that for, and then select the supporting structural element. And it should go ahead and design that shear connection there then. I could continue placing or having it design connections there. The other thing I can do is if I were to pre-select some structural elements here, so I'm just clicking and dragging to select those, and now under my add-ins tab, if I click shear, it's going to go ahead and design a shear connection for all those structural elements that I have selected, minus the columns, of course, because columns aren't going to don't have the capability of designing a shear connection there. So simply the beams in this case would get a shear connection design for them. Okay, so that's done. If I zoom in here, we can see we're getting our shear connections designed for those that I had selected then. Now if I want to edit or simply apply a connection here individually, the other thing I can do is select the Edit button up here on my toolbar. Okay. Once I do that, I'm going to select the structural element that I want to modify. When I do that, you're going to see a kind of a cube on both ends of that structural element. So that's what we consider or call our connection node. So then I'm going to select the connection node that I want to modify the connection for. And then that should bring up our node or connection edit window. I could select a connection type in here that I wanted designed as well. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at shear for now. Okay. The other thing we could do, if we want SDS2 Connect to design connections for all of our elements in here, back in that options window, I could say design the whole structure, and then click my design all. Design all is kind of like process and create solids within SDS2. It's basically going through, and the structural elements that I didn't specify, like that shear connection for, it's just going to apply an auto standard connection, or for the braces we're going to get a V-brace connection designed for that. Now, a lot of this time that we're kind of sitting here waiting, a lot of it is simply Revit having to generate the connection materials, so like your shear plates and your clip angles, that sort of stuff. It does take a little while or some time for Revit to generate that stuff. So. Okay, once that's done, then we can see our different connections. Like I said, now it should be, since we turned on the option to design for the whole structure, we're getting connections on the entire structure, then all the structural elements there. Okay. Now, just like SDS2, SDS2 Connect within Revit, we have our different setup options as far as how our connections are to be designed. We have a lot of those same setup options in here. If I want to see those, again, I come up here to that options pull down, and I have setup. Okay, so we have our setup for auto standard connections, which is going to design that connection based on the framing condition and the framing scenario. We can set up there. You have your schedule of minimums. Okay, your schedule of minimums is kind of a starting point for SDS2 Connect to begin designing connections per nominal depth of structural elements. You have your design criteria where you can select your design method. You have your default connection material grade. It looks a little bit different listed here versus SDS2. This is kind of the way that Revit has those things called out, so that's why it looks a little different there. Then you have your automatic design loads, so how SDS2 Connect is to design, or excuse me, figure the load to be applied to our elements. Okay, you have your bolt design criteria where you can select your available bolt diameters, your default bolt diameters and types, and then you have your bolt stick-through options down here as well. Bolt schedule is where you're going to set up different bolt types to be available in the project. Plate design criteria. You have options for your brace gusset plates and your stiffener plates. And then standard fabricator connections, where you can set up your hole center to center distances. If you need expanded vertical bolt spacing, edge distances for all your different connection types here. And then you also have your clip angle configurations, where you can set up your standard angle size, gauges, your hole types for your clip angles, for all the different configurations here. Okay. One thing you'll notice that's missing from this screen is the table versus SDS2, I should say, is a little table down here at the bottom where we can specify standard piece marks for our clip angles. Piece marks, stuff like that, is not actually available or assigned to materials in Revit Structure, so it doesn't actually have that capability to do that. However, in SDS2 we would. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and cancel that. Now, we talked about how to edit our individual connections just simply by using the edit button up here. I also have set up on my end here within my Revit, I set up that edit button to be a hotkey. Seems to work a lot better, increases productivity for me. So if I were to come in here to my keyboard shortcuts, just to kind of show you, I have under my add-ins tab, I have an edit. That shortcut is set up to be ED there. So what I do when I'm editing connections here then, like I said, seems to always work a lot quicker for me. If I just go ahead and type ED on my keyboard, that's going to allow me to pick that structural element and then the connection node that I want to edit. Okay. The other way I can edit things here, I'm just going to hit escape there to clear out of that. Another way to edit, if again I type ED for my shortcut, I can actually select any part of that connection. So any plate or angle or bolt that's associated with that connection, that will also allow me to edit that rather than selecting the element and then the connection node. Now when you have failed connections, obviously you're not going to have any material or bolts to select that way. Also with a shared connection like a shared gusset plate, it's a better idea generally to select the element and then the node. Otherwise you can kind of get confused, or you're sometimes not sure which element you're actually editing there. So you'll notice in here we have our connection type like we mentioned. We can select that. We have our moment options. We have our loads listed down here, so if we need to change the loads, we can do that. If we look at our connection specifications, you have same thing as you do within SDS2. So for example, with the shear connection here, if I want that to be extended out past the flanges of the supporting member, I could do that. Okay. All that's, again, like I said, same thing as we have within SDS2. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to edit this connection framing into my column web and apply a moment. Okay. I could do a bolted moment or a welded moment. I'm going to go ahead and do a welded moment. And then if you look under your moment over here, okay, we have the same options again for moment connections, whether we want to check for doublers and stiffeners required in the column, we can do that. Different things. Okay. So there then it designs that moment connection for us rather than just a simple shear connection. Okay. User connections, if I need to modify this connection, maybe I need extra rows of bolts, thicker plate, whatever the case is here, I can do that through the edit screen as well. Okay. I have down here, I have end prep, so that's grayed out currently, and I have design details. We called it design details in SDS2 Connect. Within SDS2, it's usually referred to revise and review fields. So those two kind of correspond together. And you'll see again everything is grayed out here. What I'm going to have to do is click the user connection checkbox up here in the upper right, and then that makes all those fields available. Kind of nice feature that we have in here is the picture on the right that gives us dimensions, so we know what we're actually changing here without going to a help menu or something like that. So if I highlight maybe the rows of bolts here, again, just like in SDS2, it's going to put an arrow next to fields that are going to be affected by changing my rows of bolts. Okay, so if I change my rows of bolts here to 5, when I tab out, the plate depth and all of those should update if they need to then. Okay, so you can see the plate depth change there. I'm going to say OK, and then we get 5 rows of bolts there rather than what we had before. Now if I want to view the design calculations for this, what I need to do is I'll select the Report button up here on my Connect toolbar. Again, I can select the element and then the node, or maybe select the bolt or the plate associated with that. And we're going to see our design calcs similar to what comes out of SDS2. Something that might be a little bit different here is you'll notice it looks like a link here with the numbers. The numbers listed there are actually the element ID that Revit assigns to each element. And if I click on that, notice in the model here it went ahead and zoomed to the extents of that piece and highlighted that. And a nice little feature there. Okay. If you scroll down to the bottom of this, you're going to see your limit states, your AISC reference again, kind of like we do within SDS2. And again, since I set that connection to a user connection, it's calling that out here that I set that to user and I modified that connection. Okay. Something else new here is the extended load calculations link down at the bottom. If I click on that, this is going to actually open in Mozilla Firefox, and what that is, it is actually going to list some additional information here as far as the extended formula, longhand formula with all the values, and the result then that SDS2 Connect used to come up with these limit states that we always are used to seeing within SDS2. Okay. I can print those, save that off. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now, I just did a simple, quick report of one connection there. Now, if I want to see a report of multiple connections, again, I'm going to pre-select the structural elements. Then I can go ahead and click Report. It's going to generate that report then for all the structural elements that I had selected. The one thing that we can't really do here with reporting for several elements is you'll notice I don't have the extended calc link that I can click down in the bottom there. That's currently not going to be available when doing the design calculations for multiple structural elements. Okay. Now, as far as transferring information back and forth from SDS2 to Revit Structure, there's several options that we have as far as exporting from Revit Structure goes. In this first case, I have not actually exported anything from Revit Structure yet, so we have an all modified structural elements. In this case, everything has been modified, so that would export everything. just like all structural elements will do. In this case, it's going to export all the information for those. Selected modified, again, if I pre-select members, selected modified is going to become active then, and it will export just the selected elements that have been modified. Okay. So in this case, I'm just going to simply say export all my structural elements. I have a folder on my desktop here. I'm just going to go ahead and save this file that's being exported in there. I'll call it Webinar 1. Now what this is doing here, this is actually going to create an XML file that we're using to transfer that information. Okay. I'm going to open up. I have a blank SDS2 model here. I just created this job in Fabricator right before the webinar started. So I just have a blank model here. And I have a couple buttons up here on my toolbar that I've placed. So I have an import model from Revit. When I select that, I'm just going to browse to my desktop, open that folder, and select the XML file that was exported. Okay. Comes up with a dialog box of what is being changed, or doesn't necessarily have to be something that changed. It could be a member that was added. It could be members that was deleted actually as well. So if I were to get into this process, I could delete a member in one model, export to Revit, and it would also go ahead and delete that from Revit when I imported the file in there then as well. So it's kind of more than just a simple export. It's actually kind of synchronizing those models and helping you keep those models up to date with each other. Now, I could go ahead and take the check out of the box, and it won't make that change or that addition here if I want to do that. Or in this case, I want to go ahead and do everything that it's adding, so I'll say OK. And we can see our members get added there then. Okay. Now, with SDS2, when we import that, we're actually only importing the members and the connection information. So we do have to process and create solids to generate the actual the solid material information here. But once we can do that, we can see then we get that model imported here. If I take a look at my connections up here, that one that I changed to a user connection, if I edit that, we can see we have a user connection over here. If I look at the Shear tab, Revise and Review fields then, okay, we can see where I changed my rows of bolts from, I think it was 4 originally. I changed that to 5 in Revit. That information is being transferred over within that XML file as well. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it back to System here. Okay, so now we get that connection there again. If I scoot over here, maybe I want to change possibly maybe a column gets rotated. Okay, maybe I'm going to edit this connection. I'll apply a moment to this connection here. So I'll do a welded connection there. And then it goes ahead and generates our connection within SDS2. Now, I'm just going to simply, I could come up here and say export model to Revit. What that's going to do is that should export any changes or deletions, additions to the model to Revit. Okay. Well, I only want to export these certain members here. So I'm going to select those, and then I have an export selected members to Revit, so it should export the selected member information to Revit. And I can do the same thing, similar thing within Revit if I'm going from Revit to SDS2. Again, I'm just going to call this one, I'll say Webinar 2. Okay. Now when I go back into Revit, I'm going to come up here and import all structural elements. Browse to that file, select it. When I say open, again, comes up with a list, tells me what's being changed or modified. Like I said, it could be something that you deleted and you want to keep that model up to date. Okay, it can delete members as well. Like I said, it's a little bit smarter than just a simple import and export. Now again, I can uncheck changes that I don't want it to make. If I pull that out, okay, it's going to kind of tell me a little bit of what it is actually changing. If I click the magnifying glass, it's going to zoom to and highlight that structural element. Okay, so I'll go ahead and say OK. Imports that. We should see things updated. You can see that column rotated there. Once that's done, we may have to actually do one more step here, I believe. And you'll see this also when you load new families into Revit Structure after you've installed SDS2 Connect. You may have to open that material file mapping window that we saw during the install. To access that, you go up to your options pull down here, select materials. Basically what has happened here during that import, for whatever reason, Revit Structure has actually overwritten the changes that we made to the Revit family earlier. So we have to run back through this and make those changes again to it. Okay. So I'm just making the changes to the wide flange family here. It should go through a little bit quicker than it did earlier when we saw it. Once we get this through this portion of it, then basically what I can do, I could click that Design All button up there on the SDS2 Connect toolbar. That would go through and design all with the different changes that I've made to my connections. So it actually would import, or it did import, I should say, like the welded moment setting that I set on the end of this beam, and I set that other connection back to system, so it recognizes that. Or in this case, I might just simply edit those connections real quick and force it to do a redesign quick rather than waiting for it to design all the connections again. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to go ahead and edit, and again, remember I have my quick keys set up. I just type ED on my keyboard. I go ahead and select my structural element, select that node, and I'm not actually going to change anything in here. I'm just going to simply click OK. Kind of forces it to redesign that connection with the changes that were made in there, and we can see then I get that that moment connection just like I had in SDS2, extended the other shear connections out past the flange. And then I might again have to do the same thing over here to this one as well. Notice my user connection is unchecked. It's because I did that in SDS2 and then transferred that information here. So then we get back to our 4 rows of bolts there. Okay. This really concludes the webinar here for today. Like I said, just getting you kind of into the basics here, introducing you to some stuff as far as the Connect within Revit goes. If you do have any questions, please go ahead and email those to support@sds2connect.com, or you can contact me at 800-443-0782. My extension is 146, or again, my name is David Zabka. Thank you. Have a good day.